Kia ora everyone and welcome to Money and You. This week we are celebrating Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, Māori Language Week. Now Money and You is all about helping to improve Kiwis' financial confidence and well-being through the language of money. So in other words, the more you understand about managing your money, the better off you'll be. And this week, we're going to learn a few things about money from the perspective of Te Ao Māori, the Maori worldview. And our guest today is Karleen Everitt, who is Te Kaitohu Rautaki Māori, the head of Te Ao Māori Strategy at ANZ Bank. Kia ora, Karleen, and welcome. It's great to have you here today. And just wondering if you'd like to introduce yourself, share a bit about your background and what your role at ANZ involves.
Kia ora, I roto I tēnā taku mihi nui rawa atu kia koe te tuakana, mo tō mihi mahana kia au. Kia mātua katoa e mātakitaki mai ane ki tēnei kiriata, e pāna ki te kaipapa o te moni. I roto I tēnā, he honori noku tēnei ki te kōrera atu kia koe. Ko Karleen Everitt tōku ingoa koau, he uri mai te iwi o te au Pauri, mai te iwi Morehu, mai te iwi o ngā pohi nui tonu. E noho mai nā hau I roto I te rohe o te taisuke rau, ai te tau o te awa o Waitangi, e ki tānau ki te whenua tapu o Waitangi, I roto I tēnā he honori noku tēnei. A koe te kai tohu Rautaki Māori o te ANZ, ko taku mahi kahana ki tēnei, ki te tautoka atu, ki tēnei kaipapa o ngai tātou. O ngai tātou e pāna ki Te Ao Māori, I roto I tērā, e te tuakana tēnā koe. Hey, look, thanks for the welcome, and thanks for allowing me to come and have a bit of a kōrero to you this morning. Particularly I acknowledge Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, and the beauty that Te Reo Māori has, in that it is a poetic and very strong language, but equally it is the only place in Aotearoa, here in Aotearoa, across our ao, that we get to hear Te Reo Māori right here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So to acknowledge the Wiki o Te Reo Māori and to acknowledge this opportunity, to have a bit of a kōrero to you about the kaupapa of money. So in June of this year, I was appointed as Te Kaitohu Rautaki Māori. It's the head of the Te Ao Māori Strategy. I'm the first person of the ANZ in which to be appointed in this role. My first responsibility is in regards to developing the ANZ's first Te Ao Māori Strategy. It is the opportunity where we bring two worlds actually together. I think Papa Whatarangi Winiata said it quite nicely. He referred to this as ngā tikanga e rua, is where we bring two worlds, two areas of thinking, two opportunities of culture together, where language, cultures, values come together and converge. So my role is to support the ANZ, but also our clients and our customers in regards to those who are amazing leaders in the Māori economic space and the relationship that they have with the ANZ. Look, this is, for me, it's a huge responsibility. And if anything, I think my remit is actually in regards to legacy change. Because if we look at Māori and business and just money itself, some people have referred to it, it's a taboo subject, we shouldn't talk about it. But actually our people, and I think of my ancestors right here in Te Taisuke Rau, were amazing traders. They traded internationally of generations upon generations. And so this part of engagement of people in this, that we know today in terms of business is exciting, and it actually just beats to my very heart.
I think that's lovely. You mentioned before too, that money is, it can be tapu or a taboo sort of topic. Is money talked about in Māori culture? Is it not talked about? How does it sort of fit in? And is it seen as a positive or a negative thing?
I grew up with a family where we talked about money. I grew up with a very hard-working, middle-class family who, we had to work to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And so we always talked about money. A friend of mine had sent through to me a video of my 5-year-old self. And I can recall even then at 5 years old, we were talking about money because it was all about pocket money. And I think my pocket money at that time was $5 and my older brother and sister got $10. It's a huge amount of money at that time if I'm thinking about it, right? But equally is that we were always working. So when I was younger, growing up, and I had to work hard during the summer breaks to pay for my education. And so money was always at the dinner table or in the kitchen in terms of our conversations. But I was very fortunate to have that as a conversational piece. My grandfather on both sides actually encouraged those discussions with my parents when they were also growing up. So we understood the value of money. So it was never taboo or tapu in our whanau. And actually that's probably why I went on to study business and went on to do business.
Are there any particular lessons that you remember learning from your whanau or your parents or, anybody around you? Is there any sort of words of wisdom that they shared with your 5-year-old self?
Yeah, look, I think it is definitely about working hard. But it's really interesting. Is the work ethic from both my mother and my father is very special to me. And my mother was the one who was very financially minded, and she always managed the purse strings. My father just brought he brought in the pay packet, but she managed everything. And I find that today still, that the women in our family particularly are the ones who manage the purse strings. I think if there is any notes of wisdom or messages from my 5-year-old self, is that I wouldn't spend so much money on lollies as what I did when I was younger, because dentist bills are very expensive. But I think this is the teachings of being not afraid to talk about money in family, to look at the opportunities, how we can increase the income into family is also important. But I recall, there was days at primary school where you would bank, like you'd have a day, you had to bring in your little bank book and you'd put in 10 cents or 50 cents or $2 or whatever it was. And they used to do that. And so the conversation, I think, is what's important here, is having the conversation and how we are managing our finances and being quite resilient in that space, and how we communicate that to our tamariki, to our mokopuna, to our children and our grandchildren, and engage in that discussion with them.
We often sort of talk about at the FSC the language of money, and how we can sort of make it more, I guess, accessible to people, because and we've mentioned sort of jargon, and sometimes there can be words, things like compound interest and assets and risk and all of these things, terms to do with investing, and there's a lot of terminology there that can sometimes make it difficult for people to I guess, understand. Do you find that there's also the same challenge in Te Reo in terms of like financial concepts and how they're communicated? Because I know it definitely is a struggle in English, translate all these terms, but into words that, you know, ordinary Kiwis can actually engage with. So just wanting your perspective on, that situation when it comes to Te Reo Māori.
But one of the things that I'm really encouraged by is that when I was growing up, there were no kohanga reo kura kaipapa. They were just starting. My college was the first bilingual college recognised in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So Te Reo Māori at that time was very new. Not new, but the position of having this in our educational system was new. And I acknowledge that that was a huge battle and journey that many of my elders took, particularly in 1975 in regards to the petition. What that meant, though, is that for today, Te Reo Māori is growing. Now, it is still very much endangered, and there is a requirement and a calling to action across our nation where Te Reo Māori can flourish here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I'm mindful of that, particularly at this time of Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. So to your question in terminology, is the point of why I'm encouraged is that there now are so many of our young Māori who have gone through that kaupapa of kura kaupapa, of kohanga reo, of whare kura, where Te Reo Māori is their first language. And because Te Reo Māori is their first language, they have then gone on to wānanga, and that those terms that you refer to that are quite easily used as part of our financial framework here in Aotearoa, New Zealand and internationally, we will see the translations of those come through as more of our whanau engage in this space, in this industry.
Now, is there anything that you think non-Māori, Pākehā, could learn from Māori in terms of how Te Ao Māori sees money and finance and all of that? Are there any particular things that you think the Māori worldview has to offer?
It's Te Ao Māori takes a holistic approach to our world, and there is a depth of knowledge that we come from in regards to our whenua, our taiao, our environment, and how we live with our taiao, with our environment. And business is part of that. I am really encouraged by the discussions in regards to sustainable finance. That is a course of action that together we must all take. And there are great learnings already in regards to Te Ao Māori that I'm really excited where we're heading to. But that takes a course of action for us all in which to engage in. If I think about Māori and how we look and view things, we view things a long term. And so what has always been a little bit of a challenge is when in a mainstream environment we'll talk about a strategy of 3 years or 5 years. When I am in my own whare and we talk about strategy, for Māori, we're talking about 100 years, 1,000 years. And we look towards that future, and that future that we protect, not for ourselves, but for our generations yet to come. I think that's a key piece of our conversation of a people as a nation as we come together to embrace that opportunity. And as we, as a team of 5 million, we of course are in one of the greatest battles as a nation and as a world in regards to COVID. So the question would be, can we be bold and can we be courageous to engage in the discussions of a post-COVID environment with a long-term view of 100 years to 1,000 years for us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, across the world. This is a conversational piece of not just as tangata whenua here in Aotearoa, but of course when I think about my brothers and sisters of Indigenous nations across our global village, and how we protect Papa Tuanuku, our Earth Mother, our taiao, our environment, and we protect our whakapapa, our generations yet to follow.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up this kōrero?
Yeah, look, I just a couple of things. One is, me kaha tātou ki te kōrero Māori, I roto I te reo. Let us all together, be brave in our conversations in te reo Māori, and to support one another in that journey. I think that's really important. Two is, how do we support one another as well? And that in my role with the ANZ, I'm truly humbled to be part of a family of the ANZ. When I look at all our staff and how committed they are to make real difference for family, for their customers and clients, it is humbling. There's so much more for us to do, and I encourage our families that that are wanting to understand how they can understand their own financial well-being more, to reach out to the various champions in this space. And I think that is really what I'd like to say is, let us be bold and let us be courageous in this space as we build our nation.
Thanks, Karleen. Really, really appreciate you being here and sharing your perspectives with us today to celebrate Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week ahead. We'll wrap things up there. Thank you again.